Hi all. Thank you so much for your patience and thank you for joining us today. We're really excited that we're able to spend this hour with you all and thanks for spending your lunches with us. My name is Emily Williams and I'm with 350 Santa Barbara and we are working in a large coalition with a lot of folks in this webinar. So just to sort of start us off real quickly, Santa Barbara has a long history dealing with oil development. And while our community is mostly renowned for the 1969 famous oil spill, we've actually dealt with the risks and impacts of oil development ever since the 1800s, both on and offshore. This presentation is going to provide you with an overview of current threats and their impact on our environment and on our communities. This presentation is a collaborative effort by a coalition of organizations who are actively working on these issues, which includes the Environmental Defense Center, the Center for Biological Diversity, 350 Santa Barbara, the Sierra Club Los Padres chapter, Food and Water Action, the Wishtoyo Chumash Foundation, and Los Padres Forest Watch. So make sure you stay tuned for the whole presentation as we're going to be identifying ways for you all to engage, and we need your help. We realize that we will be providing a lot of information and we certainly don't expect you to remember it all. So after the webinar, we will send you an email with information about how you can be involved with these issues and connect with all of our organizations. We're also going to be offering a couple of polls throughout the presentation, so we encourage your participation. So with that said, I would like to begin by introducing Mia Lopez from the Chumash community. Mia, over to you. And Mia, real quick, we can't quite hear you. So just if you can check your sound.
I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Haku kichichanti ka'e kikikich, Mia kakti, kapanishumoloki chumash stihisyokstun. Hello, friends and relatives. My name is Mia Lopez. My ancestral Chumash village is Siokstun on the coast of Santa Barbara. I'm a member of the Coastal Band of the Chumash Nation and speaking today as a representative for the Wishtoyo Chumash Foundation. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to ask us all to reflect on how the work we do here today and every day in our chosen fields affects these lands and the peoples of these lands that we work to protect. We come together today to stand up for and give voice to the unceded lands of the Chumash people. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Chumash community, our elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. Our partners and co-hosts here today also acknowledge that these lands were founded upon exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples, including those on whose land these projects are located. As we work together to prevent further damage to these lands that support not only our livelihoods, recreation, and lifestyles, we remember that the Chumash peoples have been separated from these lands, unable to maintain livelihoods as we should, unable to recreate traditionally, and unable to maintain our traditional lifeways freely. The damage that has been done and continues to be done by drilling, trucking, fracking, and exploitation of the natural cultural resources of this area can never be erased. There is no mitigation that can make our communities whole again. As community now, together, we can acknowledge the mistakes and atrocities of the past and move forward in remembrance and relationship with the local Chumash peoples to begin the process of healing by making sure that our processes here make room for our Chumash voices to be heard, our traditional knowledge of these territories to be listened to, and our peoples to be a part of the healing of the lands as well as themselves. The Chumash people of this area, comprised of the descendants of indigenous peoples removed from our island of origin, Limu, Anyapak, Wima, and Tucan, subjugated by 5 missions during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast from Malibu to Morro Bay and inland to Bakersfield, are now being impacted by each one of these oil projects onshore as well as offshore. The entirety of all of these projects are within the traditional territories of the Chumash people And in spite of all of this, each tribe, council, clan, and band is working diligently to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from this historical trauma. This acknowledgement, though brief and in no way complete, demonstrates a commitment by these partners to beginning the process of creating a relationship with the local Chumash communities and working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mia. I'm Linda Kropp with the Environmental Defense Center. We encourage you to ask questions during this webinar. If we have time, we will get to as many as possible at the end of the presentation. If we can't get to your question, someone will follow up with you. You can submit your questions by clicking the Q&A icon on the bottom of your screen. In a second, a poll will appear on your screen asking you where you are joining us from today. As you see the poll, click the option that best matches where you are calling from into this webinar form. Thank you. We will begin our presentation by describing the history of oil in Santa Barbara County. We will then focus on the primary threat of offshore oil development, which is ExxonMobil's application to restart 3 offshore platforms. After that, we will talk about several proposals to increase onshore production. Finally, we will identify ways that you can take action. Following the presentation, we will take questions. And I see our poll. So I will pause a moment while people fill out the poll. Okay, and when we're ready, we will move on. We will begin our presentation by describing the history of oil in Santa Barbara County. Oil has been part of life in Santa Barbara County for centuries. Natural tar was and is still being used by the Chumash today as a sealant, epoxy, and highly valued trade item. Industrial exploitation of the resource as a fuel, however, did not begin until well after European colonization. The first offshore oil drilling in the country began in the late 1890s in Summerlin, pictured here. Oil was drilled from piers extending from shore. The first offshore platforms were installed in the 1960s. Almost immediately, disaster struck. On January 28, 1969, a massive blowout occurred at Union Oil's Platform A, one of the platforms located offshore Santa Barbara. More than 4 million gallons of oil spewed into the ocean and onto local beaches, killing wildlife and destroying tourism and fishing. It was the largest oil spill in the US at the time. The spill was caused because the federal government granted Union Oil a waiver from the usual well casing requirements. The response to the spill was equally dramatic. The spill is credited with launching the modern environmental movement, inspiring the first Earth Day, spurring the enactment of environmental protection laws, and leading to the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. Despite these advancements, the threats continued. Over the ensuing decades, the federal government continued to approve new offshore oil development. In 2017, the Trump administration unveiled a proposal to open up the entire coast to more drilling, with Santa Barbara County identified as a priority area for new leasing. Although the plan is on hold, the threat remains. At the same time, the industry seeks to increase onshore drilling. Both onshore and offshore development is more risky than ever as companies turn to technologies such as fracking, acidizing, and cyclic steam injection. Next, we will talk about the primary offshore threat, ExxonMobil's proposal to restart its 3 platforms offshore Santa Barbara and truck its oil to refineries, as well as Plains' application to build a new pipeline. Both of these threats are tied to the 2015 rupture of the Plains All-American Pipeline that was carrying oil from 7 platforms offshore Santa Barbara County. Between 120 and 450,000 gallons of oil spilled from the onshore pipeline, traveled under the freeway and through a culvert and onto the beach at Refugio Beach State Park. The oil eventually spread all the way to Orange County, 150 miles away. Hundreds of seabirds and other wildlife were killed or injured. Fishing grounds and public beaches were closed. Nearby property owners were exposed to toxic chemicals. Coastal businesses suffered, and culturally significant Chumash sites were impacted. Plains was found criminally guilty of a felony and several misdemeanors. 4 of the 7 platforms are permanently shut down and will be decommissioned, but ExxonMobil has applied to restart its 3 platforms along the Gaviota coast. The oil from the platforms would be processed at the Las Flores Canyon facility, which was the #1 air polluter in Santa Barbara County prior to the spill. ExxonMobil proposes to transport oil from the Las Flores Canyon processing plant along Highway 101 to Santa Maria and potentially onto Pentland in Kern County via Route 166. ExxonMobil would transport 70 truckloads of oil per day. Trucking is the most dangerous form of transporting oil, creating risks of spills, explosions, and accidents. In fact, in March of this year, an oil tanker crashed on Highway 166, spilling 4,500 gallons of crude oil into the Cuyama River. The oil almost reached Twitchell Reservoir, which contributes to groundwater supplies for the city of Santa Maria. In December 2017, a sedan crashed into a tanker truck on Highway 101 in the middle of the evacuation from the Thomas fire, causing the truck to spill 5,000 gallons of oil and closing the highway for 19 hours. Oil tanker truck accidents cause spills that harm waterways and wildlife. In addition, such trucking poses significant threats to public health and safety. Finally, allowing ExxonMobil to restart its platforms will increase fossil fuel production in the county, a huge step in the wrong direction for fighting climate change. Environmental groups, community organizations, Chumash tribes, bands and clans, cities, labor and businesses, and local residents oppose ExxonMobil's proposal because it will open the door to increased offshore drilling, create unacceptable risks along our highways, and exacerbate climate change. We need your help to convince the county and state decision makers to deny this project. The environmental review process for this proposal began in June 2018. Comments were submitted on the draft environmental impact report in 2019, and we expect the final report to be released this July. Public hearings before the County Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors will begin this summer, followed by hearings by the California Coastal Commission. There will be opportunities for you to engage at these hearings, and we will need everyone to come out to show their opposition. Thank you for hearing about this project, and I will now turn it over to Stephanie to talk about the Plains Pipeline.
Thanks, Linda. My name is Stephanie Proofer. I'm a campaigner with the Center for Biological Diversity. So the other offshore drilling project coming through Santa Barbara County is Plains Pipeline's application to rebuild their coastal pipeline system. Plains has applied to rebuild the same coastal pipeline system that ruptured in 2015 at Refugio State Beach. The 2 pipelines that would be rebuilt would go through Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and Kern counties, as well as federal public lands and unceded Chumash territory. These pipelines would carry oil from ExxonMobil's 3 offshore drilling platforms and allow Exxon to keep pumping oil. So this is a map of the proposed project. In orange and in pink, you can see the routes for the 2 pipelines that Plains wants to rebuild, line 901R and line 903R. And at the bottom, circled in red, you can also see Exxon's offshore drilling platforms feeding into this pipeline system. This project is dirty and it's dangerous. As I mentioned, this pipeline would allow Exxon to resume production from their 3 offshore oil platforms. Investigations have shown that those platforms are aging, they're corroded, and they have several components out of compliance. An oil spill from one of these 3 aging platforms would have catastrophic impacts for marine and coastal wildlife, as well as local businesses and fisheries. Also, Plains Pipeline has a history of environmental violations and a bad safety record. In 2018, a jury found Plains guilty of a felony for failing to maintain line 901, which is the one that ruptured at Refugio. Plains was also charged for 8 misdemeanors for the delay in reporting the spill and its wildlife impacts. The jury concluded that Plains knew or should have known that the pipeline was severely corroded, but chose to maintain it in operation. Plains' safety record demonstrates that they cannot be trusted to maintain their equipment to prevent these oil spills. In addition, these pipelines would have catastrophic impacts for local wildlife and Chumash natural cultural resources. The pipelines would pass through important habitat for endangered and threatened species like the California tiger salamander and the California red-legged frog. And a single oil spill from one of these pipelines has the potential to threaten populations of these important species. Also, a single spill near a waterway could have tremendous impacts for marine and coastal wildlife. All in all, this proposal is bound to have an enormous negative consequence for our coast, our communities, wildlife, and our climate, and should not be approved. The draft environmental impact report, or draft EIR, for the Plains Pipeline project is anticipated late this summer. The county will open up a period for public comment before creating the final report. Once the final report is released, similar to the ExxonMobil trucking application, the Planning Commission will vote, and ultimately the decision will be appealed to the Board of Supervisors. Now you'll see a pop-up on your screen of a poll asking you which of the impacts from offshore oil projects you are most concerned about. Be sure to pick at maximum 2 of these.
All right, thanks Stephanie so much for that. Again, my name is Emily Williams and I'm with 350 Santa Barbara. So everything you've seen so far has been about offshore oil, and now I'm gonna take you to onshore. While offshore oil development may be some of the most notorious and visually obvious, there's actually a fair amount of onshore oil extraction happening here in the county. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna introduce you to several current proposals for new onshore oil extraction in the county, as well as provide information about a pending process by CalGEM. And CalGEM is the California agency responsible for overseeing all the oil and gas development, to update public health and safety precautions for communities that live near oil and gas wells. All right, so but first, before we get to that, we need to switch a slide. Yeah, so but first we need to talk about the kind of oil that would be extracted here. In Santa Barbara County, as in California, much of the easy to access so-called sweet crude oil is already gone. The only oil left here is heavy, viscous, and takes a lot of energy to get out of the ground. I want you to imagine a thick globule of oil, almost tar-like. You can't pump that oil out of the ground with traditional methods. Instead, you need to make it more liquid and therefore easier to pump. So to access these oil reserves, operators rely on enhanced oil recovery methods or extreme extraction methods, which are used to superheat the oil and therefore reduce the viscosity. These methods are extreme because they require a lot of energy, water, and added chemicals, and are thus more damaging to the climate, local environment, and human health. And so the most notorious of these extreme methods is hydraulic fracturing or fracking. Put simply, fracking involves injecting high pressure water and chemicals to quite literally fracture apart the rock, which opens up pockets of oil underground. Currently though, none of the oil wells in Santa Barbara County use fracking. Instead, here we rely mostly on acidization, cyclic steam injection, and steam flooding. Acidizing is similar to fracking in that the goal is to break apart the rock in the way of accessing the oil, but can use a significantly higher concentration of dangerous chemicals as compared to fracking. Acidizing involves pumping toxic chemicals and acids into the wells for well maintenance or underground for well stimulation to access more oil and increase production. Cyclic steam injection involves producing mass quantities of steam and pumping it underground, letting it soak for 3 days to liquefy the oil, and then finally pumping that now liquid oil back up. It is highly energy and water intensive. It requires a lot of natural gas to convert that water to steam. So then finally, steam flooding is a similar method as cyclic steam injection and involves the constant injection of steam underground to heat the surrounding rock formation so that the oil can be extracted. Compared to cyclic steaming, though, more water and gas are needed, as well as separate injector and production wells for this method. So in short, what you should get out of this is to get at Santa Barbara's remaining onshore oil, you have to burn natural gas and use precious water resources alongside injecting acids. So what's more, in California, when that oil is brought up to the surface, so is a large amount of highly contaminated water, which is known as produced water. This water is contaminated with chemicals used in the production and maintenance of oil wells, as well as naturally occurring yet highly toxic chemicals, including carcinogens. This water is definitely non-potable. This water then has to go somewhere. All that excess produced water is therefore pumped underground in separate injection wells into aquifers. So when that wastewater is pumped back into an aquifer, that aquifer is likely then contaminated and cannot be used in the future for drinking water, irrigation, or any other use that would risk people or animals ingesting that water. In short, this forfeits that water source for any future use. So that said, I'm going to pass it over to Tara, who's going to introduce us to the projects.
Thanks so much, Emily. My name is Tara Messing, and I'm a staff attorney with the Environmental Defense Center. Santa Barbara County is facing a massive increase in onshore oil and gas production in the Cat Canyon oil field, located about 10 miles southeast of Santa Maria, as seen on this map in the red circle. If approved, the two projects proposed by TerraCore and Era Energy would bring around 500 new wells in the Cat Canyon oil field and triple the county's onshore oil production. The two projects will use much dirtier and more dangerous extraction methods, including cyclic steam injection and steam flooding. The projects are currently undergoing review by the County of Santa Barbara. TerraCore bought the assets of the former applicant, ERG, last year after ERG went bankrupt. TerraCore is newly formed and has no track record. Nevertheless, the company is asking the county to permit their project, which includes 187 to 233 new wells. Era is a Kern County-based oil company that is jointly owned by Shell and Exxon. Era's project involves up to 296 oil injection and water wells. Because the oil is so thick, light crude oil must be imported from over 100 miles away to blend with the tar-like oil extracted in Cat Canyon. Then, the blended crude is trucked back out on local roads for refining. TerraCore's project would add around 156 oil tanker trips daily on local roads where people live, in addition to 190 truck transits for Era's project each day. Trucks spill more oil than both rail and pipeline and have 6 times the fatality rate. However, we do have some good news for you today. Another Cat Canyon project proposed by Petrorock is no longer going forward with its application. This is a significant victory, especially for the local communities at the greatest risk. In order for TerraCore and Era to inject steam for oil production and dispose of their toxic wastewater underground, they must obtain what is called an aquifer exemption, which is an exemption from federal drinking water protections. If approved, the exemption would permit the disposal of toxic wastewater into underground aquifers covering 30 square miles and open the door for a massive expansion of oil and gas production in the county. Despite the magnitude of this exemption, no environmental review has been conducted. However, CalGEM records confirm that operators in the field have already been illegally injecting their toxic wastewater into non-exempt aquifer for years. These illicit injections have likely already altered water quality. Also, there is a pending groundwater quality study that the U.S. Geological Survey is currently conducting in the field. Until we know how existing oil and gas operations in the field are impacting groundwater quality, the agency should not even be considering expanding this exemption. Furthermore, the project sites overlap with the habitats of some of Santa Barbara's most vulnerable, endangered, and threatened wildlife species. These species and their habitats are under threat from the proposed massive expansion and intensification of oil operations in Cat Canyon. For this reason, oil operators have asked the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for coverage under the proposed General Conservation Plan for Oil and Gas Activities in Santa Barbara County. The plan would streamline take permits for oil and gas activities that would harm or kill 3 species protected under the Endangered Species Act. These include the California red-legged frog, California tiger salamander, and Lompoc urbicanta. The plan would open the door for more dirty fossil fuel energy generation in areas that support a mosaic of natural habitats for protected species. ERA and TerraCor's risky oil and gas development projects would have devastating impacts on imperiled species by grading over their habitat, polluting streams and groundwater, and killing them during construction, trucking, and spills. With 1 million plant and animal species threatened with extinction, according to a recent UN report, including 40% of amphibians, allowing so much habitat loss is the last thing that we should even be considering. These Cat Canyon projects will result in significant impacts on our environment and to the communities that these projects will disproportionately impact. Our organizations speak with a unified voice in opposition to these projects, including scaled back alternatives, for many reasons. First, these dirty fossil fuel projects significantly threaten human health and the environment because of their effects on climate change. ERA's project alone would generate more than 300,000 metric tons of CO2 per year, which is equivalent to 65,000 cars on the road. This doesn't even consider the emissions associated with burning the oil. The climate change effects are not only global in nature, but also affect our region. Research shows that Santa Barbara's once mild climate is warming twice as fast as other parts in the US. Second, there are serious risks to water quality from spills of oil and wastewater. Assuming 1 spill per year for every 130 oil wells, and assuming around 500 cumulative wells, approximately 4 spills per year could be expected, with a total spilled volume of approximately 155 barrels per year. Third, millions of gallons of local freshwater are required for drilling new wells, construction of facilities, and operations. The Santa Maria groundwater basin is entirely relied upon by Sisquoc and Los Alamos for drinking water. Fourth, the injection of toxic wastewater threatens to contaminate underground aquifers. Parts of Cat Canyon already face tremendous threats to its water resources, ranking in the top 1% for groundwater threats, according to the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. Fifth, these projects are some of the most biologically rich locations in Santa Barbara County. Cat Canyon hosts 99 special status species, and the projects will significantly impact the endangered California tiger salamander, as well as wetlands, oak woodlands, grasslands, and coastal sage habitats that support threatened, endangered, and culturally significant species. Sixth, substantial noise will result from the use of heavy equipment for site preparation and grading, well drilling, installation of new well equipment, paving, and construction. In fact, the TerraCor EIR found that the project will result in significant and unavoidable noise impacts to neighbors. Finally, the projects will add hundreds of oil tanker trucks and other heavy-duty trucks each day to roadways, including Fox and Canyon Road, Palmer Road, Cat Canyon Road, Route 166, and US 101. These oil tanker trucks pose a serious safety risk to the public, increase the risk of accidents to other drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists, and significantly degrade local roadways. So looking at timing, we expect the release of ERA's final environmental impact report in late June or early July. There will be an opportunity to comment on the report and then hearings before the County Planning Commission, about whether to approve or deny the project. We will need you to speak up this summer against this project. For the other projects I described, more information about how to get involved will be shared after this webinar. Now we will hear from John Ullman about an opportunity to advocate for stronger protections for communities near oil and gas operations.
Thank you, Tara. My name is John Ullman, and I'm the director of the Los Padres chapter of the Sierra Club, representing Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. Last year, the Palm Springs Desert Sun newspaper discovered that California oil regulators were issuing fracking permits at an alarming rate. Some of the oil agency's employees owned stocks in the very companies they were charged with regulating. After the story ran, Governor Newsom fired the head of the agency, known as DOGGR, or Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources, and began an overhaul. Eventually, DOGGR would change its name and become CalGEM, California Geologic Energy Management Division. Last summer, in the town of McKittrick in Kern County, Chevron spilled roughly 1 million gallons of oil in one of the largest onshore spills in state history, certainly the largest in the last 30 years. Governor Newsom toured the site and vowed to retool the agency. In the months to come, there would be changes. Chevron was fined $2.7 million. The state placed a moratorium on high-pressure steam injection drilling, the cause of the spill, according to regulators. There would also be a moratorium on hundreds of fracking permits while they were reviewed by a federal lab. Finally, the governor announced that new rules would be put in place to protect public health and safety near oil and gas extraction facilities. Thanks to Assembly Bill 1057 by Santa Barbara and Ventura County Assembly member Monique Limon, CalGEM became the agency's new name, and its mission was strengthened to also, quote, protect public health and safety and environmental quality, including reduction and mitigation of greenhouse gases. This year, CalGEM is updating those public health and safety regulations for communities living near oil and gas wells. The rulemaking will consider a range of protective measures, including a setback between oil wells and people. It's a widespread problem throughout California, but especially in Los Angeles, where most wells are near where people live, work, learn, and meet. Last Chance Alliance, a coalition of organizations across the state, is asking for a 2,500-foot setback. CalGEM held 4 statewide in-person hearings in February and March before stopping for COVID-19. Here you see a rally outside the Santa Maria hearing. In addition to the 2,500-foot setback, environmental and community groups asked for a halt on all new steam injection oil projects like those proposed in Cat Canyon that would drill through the Santa Maria groundwater basin, supplying drinking water for more than 100,000 residents of Santa Maria. There was a large turnout from both community groups and oil industry representatives at the Santa Maria hearing. The pollution and climate impacts from oil drilling affect real people. Many spoke against oil expansion and for a just transition to clean energy jobs instead. These are some of our top talking points for submitting comments. You can see on the top the address bit.ly/CA oil reform. Remember to put capital CA. Send those comments by June 10th. These talking points are 2,500-foot setback from where we live, work, and learn, no cyclic steam well expansion, no drilling through drinking water aquifers, no drilling through fire zones, no drilling that adds tanker truck traffic. Oil companies set aside funds to cap and dismantle wells so that the public doesn't pay. There are more talking points at that website. Again, that's bit.ly/CA oil reform. Make sure you put capital CA. The Sierra Club has an add-up campaign where you can contact CalGEM through a form and you can add your own personal comments. and that address is sc.org/CA oil. You can also add your name to the Last Chance Alliance petition for a 2,500-foot setback at bit.ly/oil2500. The most important thing is that you get your comments into CalGEM by June 10th. Here's the email highlighted in yellow. You can also send it via postal mail. Because of COVID-19, there are no more in-person public hearings. We strongly urge you to participate in one or more of these online hearings. We've already seen big pushback from the oil industry, so let's make sure they hear us. The dates are May 20th in English, May 28th in Spanish, and June 2nd in English. You'll have 2 minutes to voice your comments to the head of CalGEM, Uduak Joe Untuk. Later this fall, the agency will start drafting the rules and finalize it next year. Remember those fracking permits that started this whole change? CalGEM granted 24 fracking permits to ERA last month, and hundreds more could be granted. Also, the governor's ban on high-pressure steam injection doesn't apply to most steam injection in the state. So we need you to speak up to make sure that CalGEM isn't just the same old agency that serves as a rubber stamp for the oil and gas industry. We need it to protect us and our air, water, and climate. Now on to you, Rebecca.
Thanks so much, John. I'm Rebecca August, Director of Advocacy at Los Padres Forest Watch, and I'm going to talk about oil development on public lands in Santa Barbara County. The Bureau of Land Management's Bakersfield Field Office manages roughly 1.2 million acres of land and mineral estate across 8 counties on the Central Coast, from San Luis Obispo to Ventura, and from the coast inland to the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Every 10 years, the office develops a resource management plan which outlines, among other things, what lands it will allow oil companies to lease for oil drilling and fracking. The BLM manages the surface of just 400,000 of these 1.2 million acres. The other approximately 800,000 are what is called a split estate, where the surface belongs to another agency like a state or a city, or is owned by a private person or a company, but the mineral rights underground are controlled by the BLM. Mineral rights quite often take precedence over surface rights. The BLM allows oil leasing to be auctioned for as little as $2 per acre. Once an oil company has leased the mineral rights, it applies for permits to drill from the BLM as well as CalGEM, the state agency that John was just talking about. The BLM's most recent management plan proposed to allow the whole of the 1.2 million acres to be leased for oil drilling and fracking. These lands are in or within sensitive or iconic places like the Carrizo Plain National Monument, Los Padres National Forest, Halama Beach, Lake Kachuma, the city of Lompoc, Nahui Falls, school campuses, and California Native American cultural landscapes and sacred sites. In 2015, after the plan was first finalized, Forest Watch and the Center for Biological Diversity, represented by Earth Justice, sued the BLM for violating the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, by failing to consider how fracking on these lands would impact public health and the environment. NEPA is a federal law that requires agencies to assess these impacts prior to making decisions on proposed actions or projects. A federal judge agreed that the BLM had violated NEPA and ordered the agency to evaluate the impacts of fracking and to look at alternatives to their proposal. As the Trump administration took control of the White House, one of the first of its many assaults on environmental law was an executive order that stated that environmental studies mandated by NEPA could take no longer than 1 year to complete, and reports could not exceed 150 pages. The BLM's plan covers a huge and diverse area, parcels under reservoirs next to schools, in wildlife refuges. Arbitrary time and page limitations all but assured that any evaluation of impacts would be limited and insufficient. Requests made to extend the study were flatly denied. When the BLM began the process of the study, which requires public participation, the agency didn't notify property owners whose lands would be directly impacted and further issued a poor quality map, so it was very, very difficult to identify the areas being considered for leasing. Hundreds of people attended the 3 hearings hosted by the BLM and spoke about concerns over water and air pollution, public health risks, impacts to school children and the climate, damage to protected wildlife and habitat and sensitive species. None of their comments were recorded by the BLM or included in the project documents, and Spanish translation was not provided even in predominantly Spanish-speaking locations. Elected representatives, Native American tribes, the US EPA, the Department of the Army, scientists, the City of Lompoc, and more than 100,000 area residents submitted letters opposing the plan. Santa Barbara County passed a resolution in opposition, citing threats to public resources and land use. The BLM rejected thousands of these letters they deemed not substantive or not unique. In December of 2019, the BLM issued its finding that fracking on these lands pose no significant impacts to the environment. The agency was able to arrive at that conclusion by estimating that across the 1.2 million acres, only 4 wells would be fracked each year. It did not remove even the most sensitive lands from the plan and placed no further restrictions on fracking. These are places we know and love well. They're close to where we live, where we recreate, where our water comes from, and where our children go to school. About 90% of oil and gas wells on federal public lands are fracked. Nearly 1/4 of the nation's carbon dioxide emissions now come from fossil fuel production on these lands, and the majority are controlled by the BLM. The BLM did not provide a protest or appeal process, so the only remedy left to opponents of the plan was litigation. In January of this year, Forest Watch and the Center for Biological Diversity returned to court, this time joined by Patagonia and a coalition of environmental and social justice organizations, to again ask the BLM to make a comprehensive assessment of fracking's potential harm to the environment and public health. The following day, the state of California filed a separate but similar suit. A judge has since combined the two into one. In response to the plan, US Congressman Salud Carbajal and co-sponsored Congresswoman Julia Brownley introduced HR 5936, California's Land Preservation and Protection Act. The bill would halt future oil and gas drilling on public lands in California's Central Coast. It's currently awaiting a hearing before the House Natural Resources Committee. In addition to the lawsuit, Forest Watch and coalition partners are working to build support for this bill and awareness of the issue. You can help by writing to your congressmember in support of HR 5936, or by contacting other elected officials like the governor to tell them of your concerns. Share this information with your friends and family, follow us on social media and share our posts, or submit a letter to the editor to your local newspaper. If you need support with this, we're here to help. To stay informed of easy actions you can take as they arise, sign up for alerts at lpfw.org/nofrack. And here's one more poll, so please pick the impacts that you're most concerned with about onshore drilling. Please pick 3 at most. Thanks.
Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, so that was a real quick tour of all the oil projects being proposed right now here in Santa Barbara County. And thank you for taking that tour with us. In the follow-up to the webinar, you'll receive an email with information of how to engage in each of these projects. So for this next section, we want to tell you about a really exciting opportunity to take action immediately tomorrow. As you may remember from the beginning of this presentation, when we were first starting this tour, 5 years ago, Plains Pipeline ruptured, spilling oil on Refugio State Beach, killing hundreds of marine mammals and birds, and shuttering coastal businesses and fisheries. The spill had tremendous impact and proved once again that oil drilling is dangerous. We need to tell county elected officials that we don't deserve another oil spill in this county. So tomorrow is the anniversary of the spill, and for that anniversary, let's toast to an oil-free future in Santa Barbara County and call on elected officials to end dirty and dangerous drilling. So you may be thinking, okay, well, what does that actually mean? It's super easy and it's fun. So tomorrow is our day of action, and we are asking that people make an oil spill cocktail or a mocktail and we'll provide a good recipe in the next slide as well as in the follow-up email. You should take a picture of that oil spill mocktail or cocktail and post it on your social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and tag County of Santa Barbara with the hashtag #NoOilSB. And you can feel free to be creative with your caption, but we have a suggestion. So it's highlighted in blue in the PowerPoint. It's toasting to the end of big oil in Santa Barbara on the anniversary of the Plains pipeline spill. At County of Santa Barbara, end dirty and dangerous drilling in Santa Barbara. Hashtag #NoOilSB. And we'll provide this information in the email that we'll send after this webinar. So this is the recipe for the mocktail or the cocktail we are suggesting you make. They're actually pretty yummy, and they also happen to look like an oil spill in your cup. And if you don't have all of the ingredients that these recipes call for, you can also make an oil spill salad dressing. Now, another poll is gonna pop up on your screen. Please let us know what action we can count on you to take tomorrow. All right, and once you're done filling out that poll, there's another poll that will pop up on your screen, and that's the final poll of the day. And so please indicate in that final poll which of these kinds of actions you are most interested in taking beyond tomorrow's day of action. All right, thanks for participating in those polls. We hope you're as excited as we are to call on the county to end oil drilling while also having a good drink. So now we'll transition to our question section. We've kept track of questions as they've come up in the Q&A box in the Zoom function. But if you do have more questions as we're going through this Q&A, feel free to pop them into that Q&A box. We'll get through as many as we can, but we have about 10 minutes, a little bit less than 10 minutes for this Q&A section. So let me, and I'm gonna be asking the questions one by one. And presenters, feel free to turn on your camera now, and feel free to turn off your camera, and I will, once I ask the question, just whoever knows the response can jump in. So the first question is, if either the Exxon permit is denied or the Plains pipeline permit is denied, does that effectively kill both proposals?
I can jump in first. So both of those applications would have to be denied to prevent Exxon from restarting its platforms. And the Exxon application will come first. We expect hearings to start in August or so. For the Plains pipeline, that will occur later, but they're both instrumental to allow Exxon to restart its platforms. With the trucking, Exxon can only produce about a third of the oil from the platforms as it was producing before the oil spill. So, but it would still create a huge impact to our community and to the coast.
Thanks, Linda. The other question that I'll just quickly respond before we move on is someone asked if we can get a copy of this presentation, and this was being recorded, so you'll receive the recording in an email. I think this question goes to either Emily, Tara, or John. Someone said that they've heard that the injection of polluted water from steam injection is injected below the aquifer. Is that true, or where does it get injected?
So I'm happy to jump in, and then anyone can add. So you are correct that the injection is going to be in an aquifer that's below the groundwater aquifer. So they're not injecting directly into groundwater aquifers that are used for drinking water. However, there are serious concerns that we've raised in a technical letter to CalGEM as well as the State Water Board about the pathways that can exist through fault lines, fissures, old well bores, and other types of wells that are out there. This field's been around for 100+ years. So there's plenty of conduits that have the potential to then transmit either vertically or horizontally these contaminants into drinking water aquifers. So that is a major concern. Our letter was also supported by an expert who attested to those pathways as well. So while not directly into the groundwater aquifer, the risk to the aquifer from contamination from injection and steam injection operations is very high.
Thanks, Tara. The other question, I think it relates to this as well, is if the steam injection regulations don't apply to most sites, what do they apply to?
So I believe that's in response to the CalGEM, the California-wide moratorium.
Well, I'll just say that we know the one area that they say is affected is the Chevron site, which is what we had last summer, the big spill. If anybody else could speak to any other sites.
One thing I could maybe add real quick, and I think this was sort of a confusion that a lot of us had when the announcement was first made, is it was made in a way that was saying, right, that these various steam injection and hydraulic fracturing, would be applied, or it would be applying to steam injection. It has to do with the pressure at which the steam would be injected. And so for a lot of the projects, at least in our county, there's an understanding that it might not have the required pressure that, long story short, the moratorium wouldn't be applying here. But there's a Chevron one. I think there's a couple of others in California.
It's about 4 different fields is our understanding, roughly. I think a total of 4. Chevron obviously is pretty much shut down operations since the massive spill from last summer. So, whether operations were really occurring there, how much does the moratorium affect those operations? Additionally, in Orchid, which is the neighboring field to Cat Canyon, they were doing seeing some oil seeps come from their oil operations. And I believe the moratorium would apply there. But again, there was a project in 2016 that was defeated. And so the amount of operations really even happening in that field. Whereas compared to Cat Canyon, where we're seeing this massive increase and the moratorium won't be stopping that from going forward.
Thanks. And I think we have time maybe for 1 or 2 more questions. This one I think is for Rebecca. What will HR 5936 accomplish?
So HR 5936 will puts a moratorium on current any new leasing on public lands across the entire project area for the BLM. It was introduced directly in response to that plan. So there will be a moratorium placed on the any drilling within that plan or any oil leasing within that plan. So no leases could go forward, and also it would make it so that it mandated that the BLM has to conduct a proper environmental review, the same as what the litigation is also asking for.
And final question, and this could go for anybody. Why is this local issue so important for people even outside of Santa Barbara County?
I'm going to jump in here real quick. I think just from one perspective, it's so important from a climate perspective. And I think the other one is then from a precedence perspective. And so first of all, we all live on planet Earth, right? Like we live within this global climate. There are other counties, of course, in California that produce more oil, so Kern and Los Angeles counties and Ventura County, but Santa Barbara County remains one of the highest producers of oil in the state of California, and California is one of the highest producers of oil in the US. And we're looking at the question of climate change. It doesn't really matter where the emissions are coming from, where the oil is produced, it all adds up. So from a climate perspective, we should all be looking to these high oil producing areas. And then this leads into the second part of precedence, which is if we can figure out how to stop oil production here, how to keep all remaining fossil fuels in the ground, from new production, at the same time as doing everything we can to support a just transition, a green recovery, that offers a model for other places how they can do that in a way that we're protecting workers, we're protecting groundwater, we're protecting local communities, we're protecting working right in solidarity with Indigenous people to protect, to support their sovereignty over land. And so I think these issues, right, don't have geographical borders. They affect everyone everywhere.
Thanks, well said, Emily. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen again so you can see the slides. We just have a little bit of wrap up to do. And I'm sorry we didn't get through all of the questions in the Q&A. In one of the final slides here, you'll see contact information for the panelists that were on this afternoon. Feel free to reach out to us as well with your questions. So this slide shows you which of the groups convening this webinar work on the specific issues that we covered today. And as you can see, not all of our groups work on all of the projects that were discussed. And so if you're looking to get involved with a specific project, make sure to reach out to an organization that works on that project. And then finally, this is how you can contact any of us if you have any questions. If you want updates about the projects or how you can get involved and take more action, make sure to get on our email lists, and you can find those on our websites. And this information is also going to be on the follow-up email that you'll receive tomorrow morning. That'll include the day of action cocktail or mocktail recipe, actions you can take beyond tomorrow, and information of how to get in touch with each of our groups. And lastly, big thanks to the Fund for Santa Barbara for providing sponsorship for this webinar. Thanks so much for joining.